Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Dynamic Dialog, our bi-monthly webinar series. Today is May 25th, and today's topic is supply chain resilience. I'm seeing a lot about this in the articles that I'm reading. I see a lot of different webinars, but I thought I would take a very basic approach to resilience and just show you what it can be for a company. So this is our Dynamic Dialog webinar series. We do these the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. We do a short presentation, then we open it up for questions, suggestions, whatever. The link that you have today is good for April through June, and then in July we'll get a new link. And I hope you all enjoy these and invite your friends. So resilience. The definition of a resilient supply chain is one that is determined by their capacity for resistance to and recovery from disruptions in and to the network. And if you do some research on this, you'll see several different definitions that all vary around this theme. And so this one is the one that I think is the most universal that can be applied to any company. Resilient supply chains are determined by the capacity for resistance to and recovery from disruptions in and to the network. So there's a couple significant components of these. That first significant phrase is the capacity for resistance. Let's talk about capacity for just a minute. In this instance, capacity is talking about not really size or volume, although that's a typical definition of capacity, but it's the company's ability and capabilities to fight off the challenges it faces. It covers capabilities needed to endure and defy challenges and challengers, maybe from the competition, from new products, anything that might make a challenge to a company. Capacity also has the connotation of power, and companies that can draw on their innate power, the power of their employees, their customers, their suppliers, and other stakeholders, have more capacity to resist and battle through whatever comes their way in the form of resistance. The second key phrase in this definition is recovery from disruptions. Recovery brings to mind recuperation, like going to a hospital or to a rehab center after an operation. Over the last year plus, we've all experienced disruptions from COVID. This is a challenge which some companies have handled better than others. If you want to look at some that have handled it really well, think about Amazon and Uber Eats. There are other companies who have had more significant challenges and impacts to their businesses. And there are many companies today who are experiencing disruptions, some quite severe. When you think about the chip shortages, the force majeures in the chemical industry, price escalations in wood or metals, the fuel shortages and the hacking that resulted from the hacking in the Southeast US, the shortages or perceived shortages and the price increases, all of that kind of came together. And that and many, many other things are happening right now, every day. All companies experience challenges and disruptions, but resilient companies are those that are most able to not only manage through the disruption, but to heal and to also improve and renew as part of that healing process. Those that come through stronger, they're able to implement preventive measures. They add risk monitoring to ensure the risk that that particular challenge or disruption has been eliminated or greatly diminished, or they won't have the same impact should the company experience that another time. We can't avoid or eliminate all the challenges or disruptions, but we can adopt risk-based thinking and put preventative measures in place, strive to heal as quickly as possible. At the same time, we're incorporating learnings from the disruption, those that improve the capacity for resistance prior to the next challenge. So there's a few important things in that definition. And then there's some other aspects of resilience. When I teach capacity in my college classes, I talk about 4 dimensions. I talk about space, equipment, people, and people skills. It's important to extend those dimensions to the phrase capacity for resistance, because to be resilient, companies need space and equipment that are resilient as well. That may mean flexible workstations, or in the case of COVID, allowing people to work from home, which thereby expanded the workspace available to companies to withstand the pandemic. It could mean backup power sources for equipment, but it also means sound maintenance plans, preventive and predictive maintenance to help during the times not recovery. So those help basic productivity gains, but when you are in a recovery situation, they're even more important. And we've all heard companies say something like, people are our greatest asset. That's trite maybe, but oh so true in many instances. Having the right people, those that are empowered to make decisions and that have access to communication tools to synergize with other members of the organization, they can really solve a myriad of problems. And even better is when a significant number of people are cross-trained or have diversity in their skills and backgrounds, because that yields better solutions and helps companies manage through the disruptions and recover much more quickly. Resistance and defiance in the phrase capacity for resistance doesn't mean denial. It doesn't mean pretending that COVID doesn't exist or standing your ground or maybe trying to while there's a hurricane or tornado swirling your way. It means putting processes and systems in place, those that prevent knee-jerk reactions when you do have a disruption, and training people so they know what to do during that disruption or that challenge or that risk, or something that morphs from just a challenge or a disruption into a crisis. Confidence is inherent when preparation and planning have been done. So if you train your people in what to do, they will have confidence in doing that and executing that when the time comes. And the people have to be trained. Business continuity plans, succession planning, these are really good exercises to do to incorporate into your organization. We all remember fire drills, and they still do fire drills. And the reason you know what to do when a fire happens in a school or an organization, a building that you work in, is because you have fire drills. And we do those over and over and over. So that training instills in people what to do. We've heard lots of instances of EMTs and healthcare workers who jump into healing mode when something's happened, when someone has a heart attack. There was an incident recently where there was a baby born on an airplane to a woman who says she didn't even know she was pregnant. So the baby was born early. There happened to be some neonatal care nurses on there. They were on vacation going to Hawaii to celebrate somebody's birthday. But when they said, hey, are there doctors or nurses on board with baby experience? And they jumped right in and they were able to help make sure that the baby was delivered safely. And now the baby and the mother are recovering. So whether you're on vacation thinking about the Mai Tais you're going to drink at the pool or not, when you have the training, it kicks in, and that's what you need to do to make sure your people are prepared. This definition doesn't really explicitly include speed, but boy, does it imply that. When a company is impacted by a disruption or a challenge, getting back on track as quickly as possible is paramount. And we in the supply chain industry, we know that. That's what we always try to do. And it's why having some resources focus on assurance of supply to customers and suppliers is needed, while others fight the bigger demons and look at longer horizons. So it's always important that you're focusing on speed, and that speed is to keep things moving and then be able to do that for a long period of time. So you've got very much the short-term focus and the long-term. And finally, recovery from disruptions isn't just about getting back to normal, as we've talked about, but it's about making changes for the better. I live in an area where we've experienced several devastating fires over the last 3 to 4 years. My house wasn't impacted, thankfully, but many people in my area have been. There are people that lost their homes or experienced severe damage from the fires to their home. Some built back with the same floor plan, but they modified the landscaping and materials to avoid another loss or another impact from a fire. Others took the opportunity to fix things they weren't happy with, or to make modifications they had been dreaming about. Not necessarily creating a whole dream home, but upgrading electrical systems or upgrading their landscaping, changing it to a more fire resistant, retardant type of landscaping. Maybe some of them had some smoke damage and they just ripped out carpet in favor of putting in sustainable flooring. They reconfigured a kitchen to make it more user-friendly or to allow that to be the real center of the home. Likewise, businesses should upgrade, modify, improve as they recover. If not, it's a really big missed opportunity for the business. So there are steps to resilience. The first thing you need to do is to make sure you've got a team in place that will always focus on assurance of supply. And again, we think about this from supply chain and the purchasing background that I have. I often think about suppliers, but it's also important to think about getting your goods to your customers. If you're not focusing on both ends of that, you're missing big opportunities and you're missing the cash that could flow from the customers. So you need that part of it. The second thing is you need to take a risk management mindset. This is training, this is adding tools, this is really getting everyone in the organization to think about risks when they make decisions, to assess the risk in every situation, whether it's adding a new supplier or it's changing a design or whatever you're doing in the organization. Excuse me. Then you want to map and set goals for your end-to-end supply chain. It's really important that you document what you have. You really want to look, where is your value? Not just where are all the transactions, but where is the value? And then you want to set goals and say, this is what this supply chain is supposed to do. It's not necessarily goals for changing the supply chain. It's the goals for what is this supply chain designed to do? And what is the value that we are expecting to get out of it? If you have tier 2 suppliers, your tier 1, your manufacturing operation, maybe a distributor, and then your end customers, what are the goals for that supply chain? And what are you trying to enact by setting that up? Once you have that and you understand your customer goals, your supplier goals, your own company goals for what you're trying to do to satisfy your customers, then you can begin to design or redesign your networks. You want to look at those in some detail. And we're going to talk about these in a little more detail, each one of these. Then you want to simplify, measure, adapt, and improve. So let's go back to assurance of supply. You need a team of people focused on ensuring you've got parts coming in the door, production is up and running in some way, shape, or form, and you've got finished goods and services being delivered to customers per your agreements and per your goals. It's an ongoing effort. It always revolves around, first, is it healthy and safe for people to work there? So do your suppliers have a healthy and safe environment? Does your production force have a healthy and safe environment? And can you get products to your customers in a healthy and safety manner? If you can't, then you need to focus on that and what you need to do. Sometimes if you've had maybe a fire in your building, your production can't function the way it did. So you have to find an alternate site to be able to do that, or maybe lease space in your competitor's business or another business that has the workstations that you need. Maybe it's just a matter of temporarily renting a warehouse where you can put up some workstations and have people work in there, or maybe you can work from home. So whatever the issues are, you've got somebody focusing on assurance of supply. One of the things you want to do in this phase is really look at your costs. You want to manage and prioritize where you're going to spend money and where you're not. It might make sense to expedite parts in, it may not, but you want to look at those one-on-one and make sure you're spending money in the right places. I always say, focus on the basics. Look at your people. That includes your customers and your suppliers, and very much importantly, your employees. Look at your suppliers themselves as entities, as businesses. Look at your customers, any other and every other key stakeholder that you have, and then consider what you have available in operating capital. So these are all important things to look at, and you've got to have really good lines of communication so that people are working together to solve the problems, to make the changes and to keep things running so that you have parts coming in, you can produce parts, and you're sending things to your suppliers. Again, this risk management mindset, it's really a combination of things. One is you need cross-functional membership. More diversity, more inclusion in this area is very important. If you try to do it just as a supply chain team, you're going to miss some opportunities. You need to get the finance people involved. You need to have design teams. You need to have production, logistics, purchasing, planning. You need to have suppliers involved and customers involved when you can, to make sure to look at this from the cross-functional perspective and get all the aspects. Make sure that the team that's working on this is empowered and is able to make decisions, and then has the backing of the senior management to actually enact the decisions they make. You want to train the teams, and this is everybody, and not at the point that you need that you're hitting the crisis, but before that. They need to be trained in risk-based thinking. There's a picture of a heat map there. Those are things you need to look at. One of those is impact to the business, and the other one is the probability. So you can see the very unlikely to very likely. That's the chance of the probability of something happening. That's the, and then the columns, negligible, minor, moderate, significant, and severe, that talks about the potential impact to your business. So if you have high potential impact, that's where you want to put some focus and some preparation. And again, prior to the actual crisis being encountered. And so the more prepared you are, the better you can manage through it. So heat maps are a standard tool to use. You should have some cost models where you're looking at the cost so people know how to do those. Again, this is a preparation thing so that when you do have a crisis, they know how to measure the cost or how to estimate the cost. You should have some metrics that you have in place and identified. These can be the same metrics that you use daily. They can also be metrics that you're going to use just in case you have a problem. For example, you may not be measuring deliveries from a supplier. In particular, you're looking at it over time, but you might be looking at daily deliveries during the crisis, or you might be looking at what you can do for your customer on a daily basis, where now on normal business operations, you're looking at it maybe weekly or even monthly. This is a tricky area, this next one. I say include the known unknowns and speculate on your unknown unknowns. So these are two kind of hard phrases to understand. There's things that we know that we don't know, or that we don't have all of the insight into at any point in time. If there's a fire, you know there's probably been damage, but you don't know how extensive it is until you can get in and really do an assessment. So there are known unknowns. You know what you don't know, and you know you want to try to get that information as quickly as possible, or to supplant something and be able to estimate around that. But then there are also things you don't know that you don't know. And I say speculate on this, because this is, if you don't know it and you aren't aware of it, then it's hard to consider that. But this is what you want to think about. And this is a good brainstorming topic. What are the things that we may not know, that we may not be thinking about when a crisis hits or when we encounter the risk? So if you can do this from a cross-functional perspective, it again really helps highlight things, because somebody in another function may think about things that you don't, and you may think about things that they don't, and together you're going to come up with a better preparation plan so that you can be more resilient and recover more quickly. The third step is going to be to document your supply chain, and again, the value in that supply chain. What you're looking for is, what are you doing today? If you have goals for that, and you do because you've set it up that way, there have to be some goals. What are you trying to do? Is your focus on speed to market? Is your focus on cost management? Is your focus on satisfying certain customers? Is your goal focused on satisfying a bigger marketplace? Again, these goals need to be defined, and they need to be shared cross-functionally, because oftentimes when functions look at goals, they think, what's my goal? Not what is the company trying to do? So you want to make sure that you document this with those goals in mind, and look at, again, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers if you need to, and then on to your end use customer. Oftentimes companies think, well, we sell most of our things to distributors. And so they think distributors and don't think past that. But in this exercise, it's important that you go to who is your end use customer, and then also thinking about What does your end use customer do with your product when its life is over? When the practical use of that product is finished, does it have to come back to you? Is it something they can recycle? Is it something that gets used up? So you have to think of this from end to end and over the product life cycle of the entire product. Then you want to set goals for your new design. So you want to say, okay, this is what we do now, and now what would we like to do for our new design? So then you start to update your goals. We have been focused on cost, but we would like to expand that to focus on some new markets. We have potential customers that we haven't really been able to capture. So as we redefine this, we'd like to be able to include those new customers, those customers that we haven't been able to lock in. Maybe it's a problem supplier that you'd like to get under the get out of your supply base. Maybe it's a supplier you'd like to send more business to. So whatever it takes, what are the constraints, and make sure you define both your needs and your wants for this new design, and then figure out how you can measure progress. So we're going to talk more about the metrics in a different step, but even at this point in setting your goals, it doesn't help to set a goal that you can't manage the progress to. You can say, this is my goal, but if you don't see a way to get there and how you're going to measure whether you can achieve that goal or not, then it's not the right goal. Because you can say, well, we want to be successful. Okay, how do we define success? Do we define that in terms of revenue? Do we define that in terms of profit? Do we define that in terms of volume? So how do you define that as a company, and how is that going to work for you going forward? So then you actually do the design and the redesign. And I'm advocating for you to really create in this step an ideal scenario. You want to maximize the value to your organization from your supply chain. So you want to free the design team of the as-is state, and you want to allow them to brainstorm. Some companies actually use different teams to do the redesign than they do to do the actual documentation of the current design, because they want to get that fresh perspective and they don't want to be encumbered by, oh, well, we tried that and it didn't work, or we are not doing that for this reason. They just get a free thinking team and a clean slate of paper. You want to ask what's best for your company, what's best for your suppliers, what's best for your customers and your employees. Don't forget your employees, and then any other stakeholders that you have. It's important that this team does some benchmarking to see what other companies have done and are doing to create the resilience that you're looking for. The goal here is to design a really innovative, robust supply chain that's going to satisfy your customers, or even delight them, as they used to say, and then make your company wildly successful, however you're defining success and value. So it's very specific to every organization. That's the fun, kind of carefree part. But unfortunately, we all have to add a dose of reality and begin to evaluate these changes and modifications that you would need to move from your current state to your ideal state. And that includes a healthy portion of estimating costs, and cost comes in lots of different forms. It comes in dollars, of course, but it's also resources. How many people are you going to need to do this? And how many people in your team, and maybe in your customers or suppliers' teams? And how much time are you going to need to actually make these changes? Often, sadly, this ideal version is just not practical, or at least it's not practical immediately. So some companies get this far and frankly just give up. They throw in the towel, tell the team members, thanks, but we can't do this. It costs too much. It's going to take too much time. It's too hard to do that. So we're going to just make a couple of Band-Aids changes and then go on. So I say this is when you get to crunch time, when you have creative leaders that really shine. This is the time to break down this ideal design into change management activities. So create a roadmap that's going to move your supply chain from the current state to the next level, the one after that, and then a next level. It should serve as a guide for the company with these incremental improvements over the next maybe 3 months to even 3 years. and then have your financial calculations prepared and go with these. You want to look at things like return on investment, return on assets, inventory turns, whatever other measures are near and dear to company executives, the finance team, and your other stakeholders. So make sure that you do a good job of evaluating, estimating the cost, and then break it down so that you can actually make some achievements and move in this right direction. But the other thing you want to keep in mind is that you may do step 4 and you really have a heck of a design. But then again, reality is where we all are. So your supply chain may be really resilient, but do you have maybe too many redundancies in there or too many checkpoints throughout your supply chain? Have you included your customers and suppliers that have risks with them? Maybe ones that you're in danger of losing a customer or a supplier that may be what I call a problem child supplier and not really doing what you need them to do? Have you included too many suppliers or customers that are very small, that are non-critical to your business, that you might have substitutes readily available? And have these, including these, have they added or elongated your supply chain? So have you looked at improvements to processes and or systems that are going to require a lot of training, retraining maybe, changes so drastic that they may really limit the amount of in-house experience you have to perform those processes and manage those systems? And if you can't execute things routinely, then you're probably going to need to do some simplification. The same applies to a grandiose plan that's really just too expensive to implement. If so, you need to prioritize what you need right now, what you need in the next 3, 6, maybe 9 months. So plan to do the rest over the next few years, whatever timeline suits your business. You need to employ good project management tools with this plan and at this stage, because there's nothing more disappointing and demoralizing than to make a change now that is going to have to be undone or removed in 6 months or a year. So you need adequate time to plan how you're going to move from as is to your ideal map. And you need to plan and allow for that planning. So if you get too crunched on the planning side of it, then you may throw things together and find out that you didn't take advantage of opportunities to maybe streamline your critical path, to look at things that you could do in parallel versus in series, to look at the total amount of resources that you need and how that's going to be done. And finally, if you're short on budget, look at the plans that you have. Do they offer improvements to customers or suppliers or other stakeholders? If so, maybe you can do some joint projects around this and use your suppliers, your customers, your other stakeholders that are going to get some of the benefit to also carry some of the burden and help you plan those in a little bit faster and raise that priority up. The 6th step is to make sure that you can measure. If you don't have metrics, you won't achieve your goals or even know if you really did achieve them, or if you're just talking yourself into believing that you achieve these goals. You want to go back to your goals and how you define resilience. Keep in mind those 2 terms, capacity and recovery, and what can you measure around those. So you want a baseline. You've got a good baseline from step 4 that says this is where we are. But what else are you needing to measure about your as-is state? Keep in mind those goals. You set goals in the first place for what your value chains are supposed to do, but also what you want to achieve going forward. Set incremental targets so that you know that you're making progress. Don't say we're going to start here and then finish in 12 months and then not have any in between checkpoints to make sure that you're on track, making the progress you need and only spending the amount that you have budgeted. So defining how to measure things. How frequently are you going to measure? What tools are you going to measure with? What units of measure you're going to use? Are you going to measure it in terms of time, in terms of dollars, in terms of equivalent headcount? How are you going to measure that? And then how are you going to report that? How frequently are you going to report that? And who are you going to report that to? So all of those things need to be defined up front before you jump into this project. You want to figure out how you're going to assess your progress. Is this going to be done by the project team itself? Or is this assessment of progress going to be done by the senior management of your company that you're making these regular presentations to? Are you subject to their assessment, or are you taking your assessment as a team to them? And then always, always put in opportunities to celebrate the progress that you're making. When you hit some milestones, have some celebrations. It can be very simple celebrations. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but it has to be acknowledging people for the efforts, acknowledging that the team is on track, and that you're moving toward a more resilient company. Finally, except for God creating the world, maybe, no plan is ever perfect or perfectly executed. Myself, I suspect God is still tweaking his plans for the earth a bit, but maybe that's just me. Otherwise, we know that there are not perfect plans, and we're going to need to make adjustments, and there's going to be opportunities that come up along the way to make even more improvements. So measurements and the metrics that you use, that's the first place to look. When you're tracking and you're seeing progress made maybe more quickly than you expected, or maybe more slowly, you might have to make some adjustments. You might have to adjust your budget, your time, the resources that you have on it, whatever. One thing you want to do is to avoid knee-jerk reactions to preliminarily unfavorable results. So if the first month you're not making the progress that you need, or the first 6 weeks, don't throw in the towel and give up the ghost. If you wait out a little bit, you may catch up. If you have to look deeper, than maybe you missed a couple of the milestones. Maybe you didn't plan conservatively enough. Maybe you don't have the right resources all committed to the new project. So whatever the issues are, don't knee jerk and do something too quickly to throw out things because you get unfavorable results. On the other hand, and this is where I go back to the Goldilocks complex, not too much, not too little. If you do need to make adjustments, don't wait too long. If you have a 2-year plan, you don't want to wait till you're a year into it and say, wow, this never worked out. We need to make some changes now. You don't need to make changes the first time you get a data point you don't like, or a metric that isn't positive. But if you are consistently getting signals that something's not on track, then you need to make adjustments. So don't wait too long to do that. It's important to look at the things that your company has, wants, and can be expected to incorporate in the next couple of years. Start with technologies, things like blockchain, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things. If you have those, great. If you don't, do you expect to be incorporating those? And how do you expect to be incorporating those over the next couple of years? Look at, again, go back to the capacity issues, the space and the equipment. What do I have today? What do I think I need in the short run, medium term, and then longer term? And then equipment. If you have equipment that's old and that you've wanted to upgrade or replace, now might be a good time with the goal of becoming more resilient for that. So then how do you work that into your budget? Maybe that makes that a higher priority on your capital equipment purchases for the next year. How does that work? And then again, people and the skills those people have. I differentiate in this where some people don't. They just look at people as a capacity. But I say it's very important not only to have the right number of people, but to have them have the right skill sets. If you have the right number of people, but they aren't skilled, then you're going to be spending extra time training them. Or if they're overskilled, then you're going to lose some of those people because they're not being challenged. So what are the people that you need? What are the skills they need to have? And how many of each type of skill do you need? And do you have it? And if you don't, how can you do that? Well, this is an area when you're looking at hiring people, make plans for the specific people that you're hiring. Resilient companies know their weaknesses, know their gaps, and when they have a hiring opportunity, they seek to fill that gap. not just to replicate the person that left or to replicate the skills that they already have on the team, but to augment those skills, to upgrade those skills, and to bring other knowledge and expertise into the organization that's going to make them stronger and more resilient. The same thing with your systems and processes. If you have systems that are old or processes that aren't working or not optimal, or maybe are too paper heavy or something like that, for example, how can you change that? How do you make that more resilient along the lines to create your value to your organization? So make these adjustments and improve as you go. Here's a couple of keys to resilience. So I think it's important to continuously review and tweak your design of your supply chain. When you make radical design changes, it costs money, it costs resources, it costs time, and it's not easy to do. So if you can review things, tweak it as you go, it's going to be a lot less expensive to make those changes, and you're going to be happier with the results that you get. Make sure that you have people and skills who can lead through disruptions. Again, when you encounter disruptions, companies encounter minor disruptions all the time, but it's the medium to the major ones that really test the mettle of a company. So make sure you've got leaders who can handle those situations and who are going to be able to lead the bulk of the organization to do the actions that need to be done so that your team and your company can survive. Technology is important to remember, and it can really accelerate time to value. So if you have gaps in technology, look at how you can improve those, augment those, change those, add to those, whatever the words are that where your gaps are in technology. It's a good time to always make sure that you're reviewing your technology and understanding what can be better. Benchmarking is an important tool here. Respond to the crisis. When you have a disruption, you've got to respond to that. You can't just ignore it and hope it will go away. Even if it's as simple as rejecting a lot and sending it back to the supplier to have them sort it, rework it, replace it, whatever. It has to be done, and it has to be done quickly. So this is not something that you can wait a while on. If it's a disruption or a crisis, especially a crisis, but any disruption needs to be addressed quickly. Make informed decisions. So get as much information as you can, but also don't delay your decision making too long, because if you delay making a decision, you can create another problem. I have a client who had a quote out for a part, and they had to make a design change. They had some laser cuts. They actually asked the design team to remove the laser so it's something they could punch. They got that done, but the quote, the requisition still sits there and isn't done. They got a new manager, and they changed the assignment of who was going to do this. I talked to my client 2 weeks later, this PO still isn't placed. So delaying till you get more information or till you think you can get perfect information can cause problems down the line. I don't know what's going to happen because this is about a 12-week lead time, but this could be a problem for this company. So when I talk to my client, I encourage them to take some action and make some progress on getting that part produced, because they have a deadline in August that needs to be made, a delivery to their customer. And always think about maximizing the supply chain value. But that, again, maximizing the supply chain value has to be balanced with the cost and the expense to do that. So you want to get that maximum value you can for the resources that you have to invest. And that makes that word more like optimizing the whole supply chain, not maybe maximizing every aspect of it or every value of it, but doing what makes sense and what you can afford to do and maintain over time. So what I know for sure is that we are in a very volatile time, and resilience means different things to different organizations. So if you want your company to be more resilient, or someone asks you to tell you how resilient you are or how can you improve resilience, you're going to have more conversations. It's going to have to be more than, oh yeah, how resilient are we? What does that really mean to you? And what does that mean in terms of capacity to to handle the disruptions and the recovery time to handle that, to make sure you get through that recovery process from the disruption in the network. So look at those two things: capacity to resist and recovery from disruptions. Cross-functional perspectives are always helpful. People that have a different view of the company than you do will come up with better ideas collectively with you and with other members of the team than any of you will come up with as individuals. You've got to include risk-based thinking and decision-making. It's vital that companies start to incorporate that type of thinking in their organization, in not just big, heavy decisions that the senior execs make, but in every decision that every employee makes. Remember that resilience is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a journey. There is no end. You're going to get more resilient, and then you're going to want to be more resilient and more resilient and more resilient. But it's also very important to track your progress, to share the results of your progress, and celebrate with your team on all of the things that you do. And that's not just the team that's working on some of these projects, but it's the entire organization. When you can tell your company, we have made progress in being more resistant to disruptions and we can recover more quickly from that, that's something that everybody that works there should participate in, be aware of, and celebrate that you're making progress in that direction. So here's what I have coming up for you. In June, we're going to talk about inventory management strategies. I get a lot of questions about that, and I'm going to talk about blockchain technology. In July, I'm going to talk about supply chain productivity and lean supply chains and what it means to lean your supply chain out, especially after the pandemic and COVID, when companies thought, oh, we're very lean, we don't have much inventory, and they ran out of inventory quickly and were seriously hurt by that. So we're going to look at kind of that balance again between too much and too little, maybe too lean and not lean enough. And you can always check out our website, purplelink.net and events. So if you'd like to talk about this subject or any others, you can set up a free call with me. You go to callwithjane.com and you can put the HTTP in front of it. That will take you directly to my calendar, and you can schedule a free 30-minute call with me to talk about resilience or any of the other dynamic dialogue topics. You can learn how Purple Link can help your business, because there is a better way to reduce cost and risk. And if you haven't signed up and you're thinking about getting a certification, ISM offers a great certification. That's a CPSM. I'm doing exam prep 2 right now, but it's a little bit late to start that. But if you'd like to start in the fall, we're going to start exam number 3 in September. So it's not too early to think about that. It's not too early to sign up. That's available on our events page. It's a great thing to get that certification. It gives you a different perspective, and it proves to companies that you are still trying to update your skills. And stay tuned for some more workshops. I plan to offer some workshops this fall, and they'll be announced this summer. And I'm going to leave you with this strive to thrive thought. This comes from Winston Churchill, who is someone I have studied a bit and greatly admire. And he says, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And to me, that's really the essence of resilience, is having that courage to continue, knowing what to do, being more prepared, and continuing to fight that, because we all are going to have disruptions and we are going to have to recover from different things that the environment gives us, whether that's personal or professional. And being able to continue that fight and living to fight another day, I think is very important. So that's our presentation today. I'm going to stop this recording.